Welcome to IBG TV. I'm your host, Mike Hill. And with me today is Mike Tuno from ARMD. I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to
That's
really answer some really key questions and some big concerns that dealers have right now. And obviously, with ARMD, you're all about training and compliance. Let's get right into it.
please.
The CDK breach, data breach. I know that's been on a lot of people's mind, whether they, had CDK as their, as their DMS or not. It's still a concern. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and what dealership should be concerned about?
Sure, that's a great point. June 17th was the initial breach, followed shortly thereafter with a second breach from CDK's system. Dealers should be very concerned whether they have CDK as their DMS provider or not. The reality of that event really brought into the limelight the need for dealers to manage their vendors. They're required to by law. They have to make sure that whoever they're doing business with as a vendor and they share the dealer's customer information, that the dealer legally is obligated for the the outcome of that data. Meaning, if it gets breached in the CDK instance, the dealer is on the hook for that. So the lesson learned here is that CDK, which is one of the larger DMS providers in the North American auto market, doesn't really change the complexion of the dealer's responsibility to manage each and every vendor with whom they share their customer information, because the dealer is legally responsible for the vendor and its behavior. So in the CDK instance, allegedly $25 million was paid out to a group called Black Suits. Black Suits is notorious as cyber criminals. They're well known by our law enforcement agencies. They have breached a number of businesses, schools, institutions, and the outcome of it hasn't been really good for the folks who experience the data breach from this outfit, the bad actors. The CDK issue really highlights vendor management, its importance for dealers to continue to stay vigilant. It also highlights the need for dealers to audit their operating systems, their networks, and increasingly what we've seen since that event is more and more dealers are paying closer and closer attention to their network, their ability to manage their IT departments, and the role their IT departments play in the security of that dealership's customers' data. Things like, and without getting that technical, but slightly, because it's important for dealers to keep this top of mind, is once you have your IT department focused in on keeping software up to date, as an example, keeping patches up to date, monitoring the network, perhaps using some phishing attacks that they can use as a good guy or a white hat approach to making sure they can pinpoint vulnerabilities, that the employees are now become very well in tune with the look and feel of what ransomware or malware type of activities would be coming at them. And so they're quick to not open a particular email so that they can protect the dealership's network. In conversation today, dealers now are trying more and more to prevent lateral movement. What does that mean? That means if I come in on your network with one user and they're able to breach that user's credentials, now what we wind up finding is we're working with some of our dealer partners in limiting the ability for that breach to go lateral in the organization to other users. So those are some of the things that, again, getting down into the weeds, but they're important to highlight the need to manage your vendors, work with your IT department, continue to audit your systems, train your employees on what to look for in this particular area of cybersecurity, and making sure that when this is all complete, that we continue with it. It's not a one and done. Unfortunately, if it were, the world that lives on the Apple products, the world that lives on the Google products, the world that lives on the Microsoft products would certainly not be constantly updating operating systems with patches and up-to-date security applications in the software space. So again, those are the lessons learned from the CDK issue. What's interesting about the CDK issue is they've been very, very, very quiet to the dealer body about whether or not any of the dealers' customers' information has been breached, even now. And I'd be very, very careful in instructing our dealer friends to make sure that they go through in managing CDK, as an example, because they're a vendor. I would go back through those agreements that they signed. I'm a little uneasy in some of the language that's there. It's pretty one-sided, not in the best interest of the dealer body. This really has been a wake-up call for our industry to say, pay attention. Pay attention. It isn't going away, and it's something that you've got to be diligent about, and you have to be mindful of, and consistently staying on top of the key areas of vendor management, auditing, training of your employees, and making sure you work very closely with your IT folks to keep all of that data secure.
You know, you bring this up, Michael, and I know you talk with a ton of dealers and agents, and I do as well. But I'm surprised in talking with some dealers that they're going, "Oh yeah, thank goodness, you know, I'm not with CDK. I'm okay."
We hear the same thing. It's a matter of time. If it's not CDK, it'll be XYZ or ABC or someone else. Listen, we get pulled into discussions with dealers who still have not updated firewalls. We get pulled into conversations with dealers who still don't have multi-factor authentication. These are all very, very easy solutions to preventing these huge problems from impacting your business. The number we heard, and it's probably a low number, of how much impact the CDK data breach caused the automotive retailers is in the billions of dollars. Billions. So that's the financial side. That's the balance sheet side. That's the financials. We also have the number one issue, which is your customer's trust. When your customer can no longer trust a dealer with their confidential personal information, it's likely they won't do business with that dealer.
We've talked before and had many discussions about, and you touched on it, policies and procedures manuals and things like that. And I mean, even with all the regulations we've seen in the last couple of years, and you know, we've talked about it, they've been around forever, but
yeah.
People, but I still see dealers literally just, you know, I'll put it off. I'll get it done, but I don't have time today.
Yeah, the sense of urgency is still just a mystery to us. It is. I don't know what pain point or gain there is in putting any of this off. Even if you're of the mindset as a dealer that it won't happen to me, I don't have CDK, or I've been good so far. The reality of it is, when it happens, it's too late. You've already breached the number one rule in the automotive business for satisfied customers: trust.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on to another topic now.
Sure.
The CFPB.
Yes, sir.
What's going on there, Michael?
Well, I'd like to say nothing. I'd like to say very little, but they are the behemoth. They've been around 12 years now, officially. Unofficially 14, meaning they got put into play in 2010, and then 2012 they started releasing their first in a series of auditor handbooks. It started out at about 900 pages, and it's eclipsing 2,000 pages now. So, right. All that means that the CFPB continues to work diligently each and every day to protect the consumers in the U.S. marketplace, not only in the automotive space, but in the financial services space, in the banking space, the credit card space, the student loan space. They just have a reason for being to be one source, and that is protect consumers at all costs. That's their reason for being who they are. So in June, they went to work on a personal financial data rule to essentially provide the North American market, the U.S. market, with a standardized approach that would give customers more control over their financial data. It's fragmented now. States are enacting legislation. The government, FTC, CFPB has legislation. And so they're trying to get it into plain language, simple to understand, so that it's very, very clear, similarly to what has been enacted in Europe as the kind of the bellwether for protecting customers' personal and private information. So that's been in June. In addition, they are hot and heavy on a repeat offender registry.
Talk to us a little bit about that, Michael.
Yeah, so they have no more patience for people who continue to behave badly, violate the law, and now will make a public statement very clear about companies that you just shouldn't do business with.
Interesting.
So that's a strong statement. Any messaging that comes out from the CFPB is just so we're clear, is pro-consumer. We had an instance in the spring where we had some interaction with a lender and the CFPB, and the CFPB contacted the lender. Within 24 hours, the lender at their executive office stepped in, responded within 24 hours, and within 7 days resolved the issue at hand, reported back to the CFPB, and the CFPB reported back to the consumer. Again, they take it seriously. The CFPB is not any one particular entity that you want to jump into a cat fight with. They are as big and as bad as it gets. So often dealers say, well, the CFPB, and perhaps they're right, they don't control what I do. No, they don't. Not directly, unless you're a buy here, pay here dealer. And there's some of those out there. But they control your lenders. We know in the automotive retail space, without lending, there is no automotive retail. So when the banks, on behalf of the lenders, get pulled into the mess, usually the dealers pay attention pretty quickly. They have control over that end of their business. Again, no bank financing, no car business. That's simple. So the CFPB has a repeat offender registry. In addition, the big push that is coming at us, and you're going to see it hit the courts in October, is the CARS rule, which is really this last notion with the June work that the CFPB has been pushing out from their desks are junk fees and deceptive fine print that essentially some of our friends in our industry think if I use fine print, that gets me out of harm's way. What does that mean? Well, the Coulter Group, an Arizona group, just recently was slapped by the FTC for deceptive advertising, deceptive trade practices, junk fees, meaning advertising cars on the internet at one price, having them as different prices on the lot, charging fees to products and services the customer didn't agree to, that were mirrored in fine print, that were told they had to have them. All of those business practices that you and I and our dealer friends are aware of that go on in this business. I'm not suggesting that our dealer friends behave this way. There's probably a few bad apples in that bunch. But the CFPB, along with the FTC, along with the state attorney generals, they are all over transparency, making sure we don't have deceptive trade practices, eliminating junk fees. I hate to say it because we're in the political season now at the national level, and we're probably all exhausted from the political ads that we see. But we see those even at the national level on preventing junk fees from being assessed to consumers, making it easier for consumers to have a simple one click to cancel subscriptions. That whole spirit of making it more friendly to a consumer is where the CFPB and the FTC are headed, which is the driving force behind the CARS rule. What is the CARS rule? Well, combating automotive retail scams. It says it all. So the acronym CARS is exactly that, combating automotive retail scams.
Wow.
So, I mean, it sounds pretty ominous to me. You know, what's interesting as you started the conversation today, Mike, is that there's a lot going on. It seems to be somewhat quiet here this summer, but the reality of it isn't. It's the dealers, even with the CDK breach that you mentioned earlier in the conversation here. You know, the sense of urgency, the need to get in front of this. This is your business. Let me repeat myself. Mr. Dealer, this is your business. It will be taken from you very quickly for you not paying attention to your legal requirements in operating that business. So if you're going to ignore all of the training, all of the auditing, all of the policies and procedures, and paying attention to this with a dedicated person in your organization, you just won't survive. It's that simple. I don't know what else to do with dealers when they just have an apathetic attitude, or it won't bother me, or I'll keep my head in the sand. That's not the world. That's not reality. Reality is that it is a very difficult legal landscape for bad actors to be involved in. And there are penalties and fines that will cripple them. Coulter was assessed a $2.6 million fine. I'd like to tell you that the dealer body are still making the kinds of profits they've made during COVID. They're not. The car business and the margins, the car business is back. The competitiveness is back. The margins are reduced from the COVID days. It's time to get out and sell, and it's time to embrace compliance so that you take an approach in your sales tactics that let your customers know that you care about them because you get in front of compliance. They can trust you with their information. They can trust you with their car needs. You're not there to do anything except sell them a car and provide a service that will bring value to their ownership need. All the other nonsense is unnecessary. And so the better job dealers can be at promoting or do in front of compliance, the better job they can do at getting in front of compliance and embracing it in their culture, it's a better business model. It is, honestly. I don't know of a customer, a consumer who wants to be treated uh, badly. I don't know of a customer who wants to not be shown with transparency what the transaction is. You know, I don't know why there's ever a need to apologize for anything in a business transaction as long as it's explained, it's clear, it's forthright, it's transparent, and it makes clear sense to the consumer. This is some basic stuff. You know, I was told a number of years ago that the best lie you'll ever tell is the truth because you can always remember it. And so here we are, you know, with the CARS rule coming out of, you know, some delays between the Texas auto dealers and the National Auto Dealer Association challenging it as being redundant because there's a number of laws already on the books, and there are, and it is redundant. But the reality is this is still going on today. I just referenced the Coulter Group. That was 2 days ago that hit the press. 2 days ago.
Mike, you and I have had a lot of conversations, and there are dealers that, as you have mentioned, that we work with and you work with that absolutely do it right. They are on top of it. It is a culture of compliance. It's not just one person.
It is not.
It is a culture of compliance. And yes, they're in the business of selling cars and taking care of their guests and taking care of all of their guests' needs. But throughout the whole organization, it is a culture of compliance. And I know we could go on for hours here, but could you just give me some quick things that a dealer would have in place when we talk about that culture of compliance? You talked about your procedures manual, policies
Sure.
and procedures manual,
Yeah.
a person in charge, just kind of some points.
Sure. The best thing a dealer can do to embrace a culture of compliance in a way that is robust, timely, efficient, up to date, works in their favor from a business perspective, would be to have a dedicated person in charge that has a direct report to the dealer principal or the board of directors, period. That person in charge doesn't need to be a superman or woman. They need to have the authority to delegate and to engage the organization in 4 areas: policies and procedures in the dealership that all the employees are singing from the same hymnal; training unique to that dealership position relative to the laws that apply to that position. So that's training. The third area is they need to audit. Again, the chief compliance officer or the compliance site manager or the person in charge of compliance, whatever title we want to give them, that person who has the direct ear of the dealer and the board of directors to affect change and to affect positive outcomes when they need to do so, has to be able to audit all the operational aspects of the dealership to make sure that everyone's following the policies and procedures that are outlined, everyone that was trained is doing the job appropriately. And when we find a difference between the reality of what's going on through that audit and what those policies and procedures and training are laying out in terms of a game plan, that they put corrective action in place, that they have the support of the dealer or the board of directors to make those necessary changes. And sometimes those changes may include terminating that employee. The last area that we want to be very mindful of in terms of the key ingredients in the secret sauce here is making sure that the dealer is tied into any consumer complaints about their operation. So we ran into a situation recently where a dealer was promoting a certified pre-owned vehicle, a factory certified pre-owned vehicle, not a dealer certified pre-owned vehicle. So now the factory got involved in it. And so the consumer purchased a factory-backed certified pre-owned vehicle from the retailer. When they took delivery of the vehicle was probably out in the customer's hands less than a week. Inside that week, the customer reached out to the retailer complaining about the drivability of the car. The dealer did not respond at all, didn't acknowledge it. The consumer called back a second time and escalated it to the general manager. No response. A third time, they got an attorney to write a letter outlining what was wrong with the vehicle they purchased. They included not only the dealer, but they included the motor company, the lender, the attorney did, the CFPB, because the lender was involved in it. There was an auto loan on it. And so what could have been easily resolved had they done the right things in reconditioning the car, promoting it online as a certified pre-owned with all the documentation that says this was all done and it wasn't. How did that end? Not well. So what ultimately happened to the retailer is the CFPB got involved in it through the lender. The motor company now got involved in it. So the lender, the motor company, I mean, it just, something that should have been easily resolved blew up. And now the concern is how many more
Go ahead, Michael.
how many more cars were sold that were advertised as a certified pre-owned vehicle that weren't reconditioned properly? So now they've got the motor company questioning them. They've got the lender questioning them. They've got the attorney general now in the state. I mean, just, so I say that because those consumer complaints really become the window into the operation when you've got a dissatisfied customer. So again, we asked, well, what are the key things that the dealers ought to be paying attention to? Making sure policies and procedures are in place and up to date, making sure they train their staff appropriately and it's up to date, making sure they audit regularly and document and put corrective action in place, and making sure they manage customer complaints in a timely fashion so that they do not become problems such as this. The key to all this is documentation, because in the case I just described on that certified pre-owned car that was advertised and it wasn't reconditioned properly, is they lacked the documentation to provide that it was reconditioned properly, and there was no documentation that they were forthright, fair, and transparent to the consumer about trying to make it right. How does that end? Badly. So we were pulled into it, and of course, we got pulled into it while this was ongoing, but they quickly became a customer of ours.
Well, I'm sure I am sure they are getting a lot of very good training right now.
They are, and very happy about it. And they were a CDK dealer on top of that, which, as if they didn't have enough going on, right?
There we go.
Yeah.
So let's get into a little bit of a different area because we don't think of this, as a compliance area. But what about websites?
Great question. Boy, oh boy. Websites, again, are in the window that we often, as consumers, use to look into vehicle purchasing or perhaps scheduling service appointments. So dealers have increasingly, especially since COVID, moved so much of their operation into what we'll call the digital era, right? That's the impetus behind the most recent push from the safeguard rule that was put into place in 2022. So websites have a particularly unique role for the dealer. So it's the window that the consumer can kind of come into their operation without physically showing up. But the dealer has some obligation there as it relates to the regulatory space. One that's been on the books for quite some time is the Americans with Disability Act. That federal law requires the website owner to enable their websites to have the ability for people who have visual imparities, such as maybe dyslexia or color blindness or limited vision. I'm giving you examples, so that they can change any of the contrasting or the settings on that website to be able to look at that website. And so this is a huge area that often gets missed by dealers. Now, when we talk about the brick and mortar, dealers are much more mindful now of having ramps to get into the building, bathrooms that are handicap equipped, right? Those sorts of things. But the website aspect of it is important. Typically, we see, and how you'll know that they're in compliance with that federal law, is there's usually a blue icon that's of a blue colored stick person, or a person in a blue colored wheelchair icon. And when you click on those icons, it gives you settings that can change all those different aspects of viewing the website. Now, there are companies out there, and very good ones, that we have relationships with that go wide and deep on that. But at the very least, that's where I would leave that component of the website compliance for dealers. The second area that's important, and more states, you're in Utah, I know that, at least your home base, is there's 7 states currently, and I'm sure that number is going to continue to change. Certainly, New Jersey's coming out with it this year, and more states are moving in this direction, is to have some level of uniformity in cookies management on those websites. So cookies look at the browser history, and they give the website owner the ability to market to that customer from those cookies that are placed onto that user's experience. So again, it's, we don't really want to spend time on the technical side here, but it's sufficient to say in the website space, the 2 key areas that are increasingly becoming important. One is the Americans with Disability Act, and the second one is making sure that you have your cookies management in line on your website, working in the same way, saying the same thing that you have on your privacy policy in your dealership.
Perfect. Michael, let's talk about the Whistleblower Act.
The end all be all. So the Whistleblower Act is gotten a breath of fresh air from our friends at the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, the CFPB, in July. So June, they had a busy month. July, they reinvigorated some language in putting some muscle behind the ability of an employee who witnesses observes, understands that there is wrongdoing going on in the business, and wants to do the right thing. And so they label this type of person a whistleblower. And in the past, the people who performed this function were threatened by the employer to lose their job if they opened their mouth. So it gave, the CFPB gave and reinforced the illegality of a number of things under this heading of the whistleblower. One, you can't use confidentiality agreements as an example as your escape clause for preventing employees to let law enforcement know that there are acts that are going on in the dealership that are breaking the law. There is a push for the Consumer Financial Protection Act to become stronger, that allows for whistleblowers to not feel threatened to report abuses, illegal doings of businesses that harm consumers. So when we turn that right back into the auto industry, specifically, the challenge that is going to occur for a dealer, back to your earlier comment, who chooses either to ignore it, not stay current on what's going on, is you run the risk of an employee becoming a whistleblower. They become disgruntled. Perhaps you terminate them. Perhaps you terminate them for some other cause, and they're certainly an insider and aware of what's going on in your operation. That's a risk. When you don't have the ability to document that that's not how you run your business, back to what we talked about earlier. Do we have policies and procedures? Do we train? Do we audit? Do we handle customer complaints proactively and forthrightly? Well, if we've documented all of that and we have a disgruntled employee now telling law enforcement that we run our operation illegally, you've got at least some ground to stand on because you have documentation of all those activities I just described taking place in your dealership. We call that a compliance management system, plain and simple. That's the business we're in. I'd like to tell you we're in the training business. We're not. I'd like to tell you we're in the policy and procedure business. We're not. I'd like to tell you we're in the auditing business. We're not. I'd like to tell you we're only in the consumer complaint business. We're not. We're in all of those. And we make it such in our business that it's easy to operate under one roof, simplicity at its finest, and a very complex series of laws that really the dealer often, and I understand, feels overwhelmed with this.
You know what, Michael, and we do see this, and I think there are so many different compliance companies out there. You know that as well as I do. But what has impressed us from day one when we partnered up with you and then recommended our dealerships work with ARMD is that you go through every single one of these steps, and that you're teaching them how to do this and all the different procedures and everything. They do have someone that is, talking about all these different things, but it never ends. It's continual. It's continual. Day after day, week after week, month after month, year over year. It's something the dealer has to do. And that's what I love about ARMD is the fact that you guys are staying on top of it. All the newest updates, what's going on, what you need to be aware of, and even down to this person hasn't finished their training. This person just started. The dealer knows where everything is, along with their chief compliance officer too. And that's what I really appreciate about ARMD.
We take it seriously.
Yes,
but we take it seriously.
It's all encompassing.
It is all encompassing. We've got you covered 360 degrees. It's that simple. Mm-hmm. There are compliance companies out in the marketplace. I'd like to think we're the best. And there's a real simple reason why we're the best. Trust. It's what really is the critical success factor to a retailer being not just good, but great. Their consumers, their customers trust them. When the employee embraces compliance and they understand it and they internalize it and that culture changes, this element of trust becomes easier to establish. You now stand out from the pack, if you want to call that, if you want to use that word in the automotive retail space. You stand out from the other dealers who don't. It's obvious. When you walk into a dealership, you don't see customer information lying around on desks. You don't see sales tactics that screaming and hollering of customers in the showroom. You don't see the customer's car in service being routed through for any non-public information. You don't see the service counter full of ROs, full of customer information. You don't see the dealership not paying attention to any of the cash reporting rules, which increasingly put them in difficult spaces. You don't see the used car inventory not up to date with the buyer's guide. We cover all of those things. So when we talk about completeness, we're there. But the one thing that we've earned, we're coming up on 10 years in business now, is trust. We do what we say we're going to do every single time. And we just don't give you a fish so you eat today. We teach you how to fish so you eat for a lifetime. And that's a huge philosophical, strategic business difference between ARMD and anybody else in the marketplace.